It should be no surprise to anyone who wondered here that Max Payne has a remake in the works. Well, in case this is the first time you've heard of this, you're welcome I guess. Naturally, the announcement brought up the classical arguments for and against remakes. But what happens when the initial release is almost 25 years ago and the studio responsible for the original game and its remake keeps improving every aspect of their work during that time? This is what makes Max Payne's remake announcement even more interesting. That's because the term remake itself implies more than a simple touch-up here and there. A remaster would have brought some bug fixes and higher quality assets, making the game fully compatible with modern rigs. You know, boring stuff that one could solve alone in 20 minutes and some downloads, but this remake intends to combine the first two games into one into their modern Northlight engine, so it's a complete redevelopment of the game from the ground up. That's what I'm about to dedicate the rest of the video for, with a big focus on the first game of the series. You'll see why. Before I start, a little housekeeping. Max Payne was the first review I've ever published on this channel. Watch at your own risk, I'm only keeping it up as a reminder of how far I've come in the past 3 years. Also because I'm a dumbass and lost all the footage of my first 3 videos. I don't intend to re-review the game, even if it's gonna be a lot of stuff that would typically fall into one. Also, I have to put out the big disclaimer that besides Control, I have not played any of Remedy's games post Max Payne. Boo, sinner, I get it. At the same time, as of the date of recording this, there are absolutely no details about what the remake will consist of. Therefore, what you'll see here is a fancy series of educated guesses at worst and a masterful string of enlightening prophecies at best. In other words, expect half of my arguments to age like milk or be almost as conspiratorial as your average Max Payne story. And last but not least, for those enjoying my work, there is a Patreon where you can chip in and support my channel. Thought you're gonna escape my self-plug attempts, huh? Suckers! As we all know from most remake or remaster announcements, there's quickly followed by the gut reaction of "but the game still runs well." In the case of Max Payne, it's pretty close to reality. You will need to install a few patches to launch it, but it's certainly less of a headache than other older games running on modern systems. Granted, that's mainly due to the community's efforts to compile all the required changes in easy-to-apply installers, because the compatibility issues are unique to it and its sequel and utterly impossible to solve by those not very handy with this kind of stuff. For example, running Max Payne on an AMD processor starting from Ryzen 3000 will give you the enigmatic JPEG error. A user called Luis Gualma pinpointed the issue and made a hex edit of the game's executable to circumvent the error. All of this happened because the newer processors gave a CPU ID that was read wrong by the game, leading to another undiscovered until then error. Naturally, the fix had to be somewhat guessed since every single Ryzen 3000 CPU and newer suffered from it, and the fix needed to work equally for all of them. Isn't forward compatibility fun? After you apply the changes, you're good to go and everything runs perfectly. It's quite impressive considering that it runs on a particular engine developed specifically for it, with no other titles adopting it afterwards outside of Max Payne 2. And it still ran better than Call of Juarez the Cartel. Jesus Christ. Once you start playing the game, there's little stuff that gives away its age in the graphical department in an obvious way. Things like the baked shadows and lack of reflections are noticeable, as well as the low resolution textures, but this game is another excellent example of the power of a well executed art design that can make technical limitations irrelevant so long after the launch. Okay, the flame sprites look like hot garbage in the restaurant escape level. Okay. Max Payne is a dark story, and the environment fully enforces that impression. The only other part where the game looks downright ugly is the models. The details of the human models in particular stand out in this regard. But to be fair, even more recent games still miss the mark on this one, so we'll excuse it a bit. The gameplay blew everyone's mind in 2001. It was the first well-known game that dabbled in bullet time, as the Matrix was all the rage in the time. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't call the bullet time a massive invention, Reduced to its bare minimum, it's nothing more than manipulating the game's timescale, which can be done with console commands in plenty of other games before Max Payne. It's only in Max Payne 2 where entering bullet time increases your movement speed and rate of fire, but here, the only benefit is the extra reaction time you've got against dangers. Remedy were wise and chose to add shoot dodge and make all guns shoot projectiles instead of being hit scan. It's very likely the first time real-world guns did this in a video game, by the way. These changes transformed Max Payne from an average shooter to an absolute sensation. But it could be better. The shoot dodge forces you to stand up after dropping on the floor, meaning you're a sitting duck if there are enemies still alive around you. The fired bullets are so slow, you might as well be shooting water pistols, since connecting a shot to an enemy moving sideways is almost impossible. Not to mention that most guns are laughably inaccurate, with wild RNG dictating the direction of each projectile you shoot. Fortunately, all these complaints were flawlessly addressed in Max Payne 2, so those improvements can effortlessly be applied here and offer a better experience as a consequence. And here comes one of the things that will obviously be retouched in the remake, Max Payne's model. I'm not gonna lie, seeing Sam Lake's face in a permanent semi-constipated grin is funny as hell. But let's be honest, this was done to keep costs down because Remedy barely had a budget to speak of in 2000. For such a dark setting, these unintentional sorts of laughs just feels wrong and out of place. Speaking of accidental comedy, these exclamation marks appearing in Max's house are fucking hilarious. What the fuck is this supposed to mean? Is the dead wife gonna give us a quest? Oh Max, collect 10 bare asses while I'm gonna just rest here. Oh my god, this isn't how you want newcomers to take contact with your noir story. I wouldn't be surprised if they keep Sam Lake's face as an optional setting, but at the same time, there's an argument against it. Now that Alan Wake 2 came out, the character Alex Casey was introduced in Remedy's shared universe, cinematic universe, video game Anyway, he's also been modeled by Sam Lake and is a reference to Max Payne himself. It would be strange to suddenly have two characters sharing the same model in a shared universe, but stranger things have happened, I suppose. There's also the possibility of using James McCaffrey as a model, but I doubt this will happen after his unfortunate passing in December 2023. The most likely scenario is that the actor used to model Max Payne in the sequel, Timothy Gibbs, will be used again as a reference for consistency's sake. After all, since both games will be combined together and Max Payne 2 needs close to no fundamental changes in the models, this seems to be the most sensible path. This brings up a very intriguing side issue to tackle. Because of the aforementioned low budget Remedy had, comic book style shots were used instead of in-game cinematics. On the one hand, these should be kept in the remake for the sake of faithfulness. They are the most timeless part of the game by far, and they ooze the atmosphere the game's going for. But since all character models were changed between Max Payne 1 and 2, if Remedy decides to update and make them consistent, then the same thing needs to be done for the comics as well. I mean, come on, Sam Lake's dragged his entire family to cover the whole roster of characters. None of them are professional actors and it shows. Mona Sachs is the funniest of them all because there's nothing about this model that screams femme fatale or killer seductress. Poor girl looks like a librarian was handed a prop gun and told to act tough. Just ask them to return the books, honey. This is a far more delicate thing to update than character models, since here we're talking about studio photos with many filters applied to them, meaning that new photography sessions are needed if you want to recreate the comics with new models. This is why the James McCaffrey theory drops from the start, but the Timothy Gibbs alternative has its own complications. The man's in his 50s and only somewhat resembles his looks from back when Max Payne 2 was made. The power of wigs and makeup can only get you so far when you try to compensate for something like this. Then, will the filters themselves be applied the same? What if they're updated but don't emulate the original style well enough? As you can see, plenty things can go wrong. But then there's the other side of the argument. Maybe Remedy wants to do away with the comics entirely. After all, their original intent was to use the in-game cutscenes before settling on comics as a compromise. Now they have the budget, technology, and the expertise to deliver stories within the game, as proven countless times in Control, for example. The little footage I've seen of Alan Wake 2 proved that Remedy can deliver great narrative moments without pulling the player away to show him what's essentially a glorified PowerPoint slideshow. Not to mention that there are plenty of moments where Max Payne shows comic strips on mundane interactions with objects where a transition to an in-game cutscene would not do much harm to the atmosphere. As an example, Max picking up a letter and reading it isn't a narrative cornerstone that hinges on the stylized comic books to deliver the message. I love them, but I can't deny why they're here in the first place. But I have to admit that removing them would completely destroy this fourth wall breaking joke. Another technical aspect that must be addressed is the audio compression. I hope all the voice acting was recorded in a high quality, preserved format, because it's grating to hear the dreaded hiss of a crushed MP3 every time James McCaffrey delivers his lines.
The gate was locked. Alex wouldn't have set up a meeting at a closed station. Something was off. A crumpled letter lay on Gagniti's desk. V-head junkies could go off without a warning. I had to be careful. The walkie-talkie military lingo could mean only one thing. They were getting ready to destroy the evidence and vanish into the night. I was so close. The hidden truths were just around the corner.
Unfortunately, showing examples would be pointless unless you're watching YouTube video with good headphones. A simple filter with an upscaler won't cut it because the initial bitrate compression kills a lot of details that you can only hope to get back with a monumental amount of manual labor and talent from your sound engineer. Moral of the story? Preserve your raw recordings. I know I haven't done so always, and it bit me in the ass every time. I'm really curious about how they'll approach the art direction of the levels. When they were making the original game, Remedy sent some of their artists to take photos of the seediest, most rundown parts of New York. This is why levels such as the Prospects, the Docks, or the abandoned steel mill look so dilapidated and decayed. Usually it would be acceptable to update and expand the reference photography, but New York has changed enormously over the past quarter of the century, turning from a city with severe crime problems into one of the safest cities in the United States. Quite the performance given its monumental size. But I'm not sure you can find much of 1999's New York look either. I seriously doubt Remedy would make the monumental mistake of making the city look like in the present day, so I hope they have access to late 90s urban photography to give them more ideas to play with. The level design though will definitely need a significant overhaul. I can't stress enough how annoying the enemy placement is throughout, with shotgunners rushing to blast you from around each corner and each opened door. It offers a challenge, sure, but it sure ain't fun. The layouts also lean towards nonsensical, with many design experiments occurring throughout the levels. I can't fault Remedy since, it was their first major game, but you get my point. Out of the regular levels, I can safely say that the docks were the least fun to go through because, for the most part, you simply walk through long corridors masked as passages between shipping containers. The gunplay certainly isn't designed for it since all guns except the sniper rifle are inaccurate. Not to mention that due to the low speed bullets have, shooting at someone at these distances is akin to sending smoke signals. Unfortunately, these things drag the whole section down. But hey, at least you get to ride the shipping crane. Exciting stuff. Also, I find it very funny that Max encounters these tough guys who, in the comic strip, scream about promises to kill him, only for them to run away and call on their goons to protect them at the moment they're in the same room as him. I'm not exaggerating, every single name opponent does this shit. Wow, you're such a tough guy within the comic strips, it would be a shame if the gameplay would resume. I said regular levels a minute ago for the exact reason you're thinking of. Yes, I fucking hate the nightmare levels. How did you guess? stylistically, I can't fault them. They scratch the surface of what Remedy has since become an expert on. They dabble with the supernatural, dreams, psychology, grief, and so many other sophisticated words we all love to say, but not go into further details, fearing we'll out ourselves as snobs. But to experience them, oh boy are they a pain in the ass. Replaying these was the #1 reason why I got really pissed when I remembered I lost the footage I made 3 years ago. They managed to tick the biggest button of personal annoyance for yours truly by throwing mazes into it. I hate them. I don't find them fun. They're not offering a creative challenge, and they certainly don't encourage players to use gameplay lessons to push their progress further. And absolutely always, mazes bring the pacing to a grind. The second nightmare level ups the ante by combining a maze with extremely thin passages from which you slip as if they're being oiled with Vaseline in advance. As if labyrinths weren't annoying enough, now I have to deal with weird controls too. Max Payne 2 showed how they're supposed to be done, so I have no doubts that Remedy will find a significantly more satisfying way to show Max's torment and guilt. Just please, no more mazes! Despite the flaws I point out and the occasional rants, okay, occasional my ass, Max Payne is a good game as it is. Someone without contact with games made before 2020 won't find an over-designed clunky mess as some would expect from games released in early 2000s. But I would be lying to myself if I didn't admit the remake is both necessary and welcome. The series deserves to leave a better first impression on newcomers who weren't alive to play it on launch. I don't have many problems plowing through its quirks because I have a lot of attachment for it since I played it first time in 2001. Doubt someone who has never played it before would be as generous as I am. The best part is that the improvements don't even have to touch the story and the writing, which are the heart and the soul of the game. Sorry G-Man Leaves, it's not just about how easy you can fix compatibility issues. Yes, I still find it massively ironic that this tweet fell right on top of my timeline hours after I started preparing for this video. Thanks algorithm, I suppose. Now I have a fancy screen cap. Woohoo! I'm commenting against big YouTuber. Wow, my 15 minutes of fame are coming. No. Max Payne 2 needs a lot fewer changes to its core in comparison. The gameplay might as well remain completely untouched because it's close to perfect. The crazy Havoc interactions sure are wacky, but they also provide a ton of spectacle into an already spectacular shooter. The character models consisted of professional actors this time around, so no more silly moments of Sand Lake grinning into the camera in what is supposed to be a serious moment. I could go on, but most of the problems I found worth addressing in the original game were already fixed in the sequel. The only problem I found was that the audio recordings are obviously made with different equipment, and the remake must find a way to mask this difference. But overall, Max Payne 2 certainly doesn't need a remake. Besides compatibility fixes, the game has aged very little and is a blast to play still. But I'm still excited to see the same great game under a cutting-edge coat of paint that I know Remedy can offer. Now imagine how funny this segment will seem in hindsight if the remake ends up fucking trash. And there you have it. Thanks to everyone for listening to this unorganized train of thoughts. Click the buttons, leave your thoughts, and share this with your like-minded fellows. Until next time, cheers!